Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined, as always, in what appears to be, it looks like a Philadelphia Phillies shirt, but I think it's just the red and the stars. It's Nick Pollack.
What is happening? It's
Nola
live every
Day.
day like it's Nola Day. I just felt inspired to, I feel like he gets kind of forgotten about in the whole thing, and I just wanted to wear that today.
Yeah, we don't want to. We never want to forget about pitchers on here. Even the ones
Never.
that we don't think are particularly good, they deserve our time and attention.
Absolutely, they do.
Yes,
I want every pitcher to be dope.
That's true, and we're still going to be talking about some good pitchers here because we are starting. We are continuing our off-season discussions of 5 pitchers at a time, starting with number 46. So we are still within the top 50 of Nick's top 200. Again, if you have not checked out the top 200, it finally dropped late last week over on Pitcher List. It is just a mammoth article. You can follow along with us 5 by 5 if you want and read some of the breakdowns. You can do it as a little chapter reading in bed before going to sleep. Just maybe 5-6 pitchers at a time. It's like a nice chapter of a novel, and then get cozy with Nick's words, and then you go to sleep.
Yeah, they pretty much just hear the sweet nothings that I tell these players as you go to bed every night. And the funny thing is I already had an update, and we're going to get to that later in this show. If you're listening on the podcast right now, well, actually, you've already heard that update. But if you're watching live, it's a little confusing. I know we had to move things around, but we're not going to do that. We're going to start with 46 right now in this live show.
Yes, we're going to start number 46. And at First Pitch Arizona, you were asked about somebody going outside. I believe it was the top 200 at that point in ADP.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. Who you thought was in for a breakout season. And you answered this gentleman, number 46, Gavin Williams.
Yep.
Why are you so high on Gavin Williams?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to be down on Gavin Williams. 310 record. Means he's going to be like all the way on the bottom of the play rater. I never talked about record, but that's just, I didn't realize it was that bad. 76 innings and a 4.86 ERA, 137 whip. Everyone's going to go, Nick, you're absolutely bonkers. And maybe I am missing, I'm really depending too much on the development, but we're at the point in our drafts where you got to start leaning into ceiling and who are those guys that you're going to hold on to and everything's okay. And for Gavin Williams, I feel like he came back from this injury. He was stalled out for a while. He didn't really get to see him get into his groove until later on when he had more innings under his belt in his final 8 starts. He's only made 16 of them. However, when it comes to stuff and ability, Gavin Williams is the closest comp that I have in the majors to Garrett Crochet. And I know that sounds nuts because they're obviously two different outputs of performance, but Garrett Crochet has the main factor of Gavin Williams has the main facet of Crochet's arsenal that we love, which is a high velocity fastball with elite extension. We're talking 95th percentile extension, 7.2 feet, and 94th percentile velocity, 96.97. And that is such a great foundation that allows for Gavin Williams, who also has a 70% strike rate on it, so it's not like he struggles to get over the plate, to then break off with a cutter. And that's how Garrett Crochet became the star that we know. He actually, if you remember, in the beginning of 2023, Garrett Crochet was not very good for 6 starts. People were wondering if you should drop him. He had 3 really good ones and 3 really bad ones. And everyone was thinking, oh no, should we jump ship? And it's funny because I was so out at first. And then when everyone wanted to jump, I was like, no, I'm in. It's weird. I was right once, wrong once. Okay. And Garrett Crochet added the cutter in the zone. That was really the big difference. And it was above 90 miles per hour, 3 strikes with it. And guess what? Garrett Crochet started to do that.
Gavin Williams started to do that.
Oh man. See, I'm just going to mess this up the entire day. Gavin Williams started to throw a cutter, and it's a 63% strike rate so far. Swing strike rate of 17% on this at 91 to 92. And I think that's really the difference maker for me, for Gavin Williams for next year. I really see that working, of that difference inside the zone. And the good news is that unlike Garrett Crochet, where he doesn't really have a slower offering that he trusts, the changeup slider haven't really been a focus because he doesn't need to. At least Gavin Williams does have a curveball that in the past has been a really filthy swing strike rate pitch, a really good put away offering. Last year was not nearly as good, just a 20% put away offering. Actually wasn't beforehand at 18%, but he threw it 49% in 2 strike counts, which is good. We want to see him do that with that curveball, really save it, and then really get ahead with these 4-seamers, cutters, have success there. So I think the mold for Gavin Williams in 2025 is really good. And you have the Guardians are going to allow him to go every 5 games. Is going to be able to go 6+ innings over 90 pitches consistently. He has a really good foundation in a fastball, a developing cutter that I think takes a step forward next year. And then also another pitch, a third one to throw in 2 strikeouts to also help get those strikeouts. So I'm a huge fan of this. I think you just kind of ignore all the things you just saw with a 10% walk rate for Gavin Williams as well. And I think once you see the cutter and 4-seamer really be the plan of attack, he's going to have a fantastic season.
Yeah, and I talked about Gavin Williams at my first Pitch Arizona presentation, and the idea that like new pitches, it often takes until the second year that a pitcher's throwing them before they really kind of have a little more command and control over it. He was throwing the cutter 17% of the time from August 1st on. It became a bigger part of the arsenal. We should expect that to continue, and the performance of the pitch should be expected to get better as well. I like that he throws it over the plate against lefties, and he throws it off the plate a little more against righties, and he does get swinging strikes off the plate with the cutter against righties. So we don't want to think of it just as a opposite-handed offering where he's trying to jam lefties up and in. He actually uses the cutter low in the zone, kind of like you would a more traditional slider, except it's a slider that also has use against lefties. So it can be an out pitch against righties. And I'm excited to see what happens for him next year. I'm kind of with you. I'm expecting a little bit of a not like a mini breakout, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, again, it follows the mold of like floor should be good, and there's upside for more. Also, the cutter and the 4-seamer each had a 36% ICR last year. That's with the cutter only being thrown 12%. I think if he throws it more often and inside the zone, both those pitches benefit, because then it becomes a harder challenge for hitters to figure out, is this the 4-seamer or the cutter coming out of his hand? And thus they have more, less conviction before the pitch is thrown, which is what you want. You want to confuse these guys and make them struggle. Oh, what's going on? That's exactly what you want. And having an excellent extension does that.
Yes. Pitch mix change is also crucial for your number 47th ranked starter. And it was a pitch mix change that happened after the trade deadline, which sent Yusei Kikuchi to the Houston Astros. We saw a huge second half from Kikuchi. And so, but 47th, are you not expecting it to carry over, or does it depend on where he winds up? Anything?
He's weird. Okay. Everyone, it's really nice to have narratives that just kind of fit, and everyone just goes, well, this is the fact, so that's that. And the narrative I see is the Astros were like, okay, so Yusei Kikuchi just throw 4-seamers and sliders, and that's that, which may eventually have been the case. However, it's not as simple as that. When the Astros acquired Kikuchi from the Blue Jays, he was already introducing more sliders. And the 4-seamer actually is this really, really excellent shaped pitch. He has a really low release point for it. It has good vertical break. He has 7 feet of extension. It's at 95. This is a really, really excellent 4-seamer. And he didn't really have anything else to back it up. Also, he's more precise with that 4-seamer this year, Kikuchi, which is great. It was a big step forward in the first half, but he had a changeup that was coming in that wasn't really working, and the slider disappeared for a bit, and then it was coming back. The curveball is still a good offering. I know a lot of people saying it's really bad for him. I don't think it is. I think it's a good extra strike pitch that really helps things, helps him get through when guys are really locked in on the fastball or the slider. But the main difference we saw when he went to the Astros was they're like, okay, cool, throw the changeup. And it was good the first start. Yeah, like the best control and command I've seen from the entire season in that first start for the Astros. But then Kikuchi didn't have it the next start, and the changeup started disappearing. And that was a good thing because the slider was fixed finally. He finally felt it, and pairing off with the fastball was great, and he had success with that. I don't know if we're going to see that again. I think Kikuchi really does go through periods when it comes to his secondary specifically. We've seen him go through this, that, and that. We've seen him do, oh, we're not going to do the changeup anymore. We're going to move curveballs now, or we're going to throw more of these for strikes and these not for strikes. I think he's a tinkerer. He's always going to be that way. At the end of the day, though, I think the 4-seamer is still really good. And I see that Kikuchi can maybe get that changeup going, because if you're a lefty, you need to have a really good changeup. It's generally the impetus to bring you into the potential top 20 is to have that elite changeup if you already have a fantastic fastball. I hope we see it. I also imagine he goes to the Dodgers. That just makes the most sense to me. But if Roki's going there, then
yeah, it depends.
Whatever. But he just feels like he fits inside of that, especially as a lefty that they need now too. So I think that a smart team will get Kikuchi, because you're going to see the 4.05 ERA 120 whip. And I think some basic teams are going to be like, nah. While the smart ones will be like, oh, no, you're way better than this. You had a 28% K rate. So I like Kikuchi. I just recognize that there's more volatility in his arm than I'd like.
Yeah, he's also been linked to the Red Sox, as a fallback option, not one of the primary options, but the Red Sox likely looking for a starting pitcher and a lefty starting pitcher. So that could be a potential option. But again, not like a primary, but a fallback. I also have Kikuchi at exactly 47. He's in my tier of veterans with upside and question marks. And it's like a pretty vague tier name, or a pretty generic tier name, but that's what it is, right? We've seen Kikuchi flash. Right. We've seen what he can do. We've also seen that he goes through this in spurts. And so I don't think we unlocked a new level, but I think you're going to be fine with having him on your roster for most of the year. And so, totally happy with Kikuchi. But again, ranking may change a few spots depending on where he winds up.
Yep.
We're another veteran that I have in the same tier of veterans with upside and question marks, and another left-handed pitcher is your number 48 starter, Robbie Ray. We didn't really see much from him this year. Came back from injury and people were excited. He was, had a few good starts, a few starts, but a lot of big fab money spent on Robbie Ray, and then he ended the year on the IL. And so what are we doing with him next year?
I mean, I don't think he's going to be like detrimental, right? I mean, that's that at the end of the day, I think it's really important to have these kind of players who, I'm going to call him a cherry bomb, who I don't think I'm going to drop. Like, you draft Robbie Ray, is it really going to be at a point that it's in your 5 ERA 135 whip and you just can't do it? Maybe it is, then it becomes a hipster headache-inducing starting pitcher stifling the entire roster. I get it. I think that Robbie Ray in general is really good. Really good four-seamer, generally has a slider for strikes, generally has his curveball in there too. And yeah, we're just going to see him still in the Giants also. I thought he was going to be a free agent and opt out, but nope. The guy is sticking around in San Francisco. I think he should just be solid. It's going to be a beneficial strikeout arm where you're going to have to digest a little bit of the ratios, but I really don't think we're going to get to a point that his ratios are going to be too bad that we want to actually drop him. It's that simple.
I mean, it's another guy where it's like, we've seen the upside, right? We know what the peak is. We know we're probably not going to get what we've seen in the past, which is like that Cy Young year performance. Yep. But it's rare that he is so bad that you don't want him on your team. The park context is going to be good. We'll see what the team context is. The Giants are going through a little change in their front office, so we don't know, who they're bringing in terms of, what the lineup and the defense behind him and all that kind of stuff is going to look like. But Ray is somebody with elite strikeout upside who, will have some ratio fluctuation. And I agree with you that, like, this is a good dart throw at the end of drafts, because we think of the upside in young players so much, but we sometimes forget the upside in veterans. And Ray has some volatility, but he has a lot of upside. He could be your SP2 and it wouldn't be a surprise. He could also be like your SP4, SP5 in fantasy, and that also wouldn't be a surprise. So it's a very wide range of outcomes.
Sure.
We're going to end this episode with two pitchers who are young, who are coming off pretty good seasons that people might be surprised you have ranked, let's call it this low, but we'll talk about those guys after this break. So the first young pitcher inside your top 50, but maybe lower than people think, is Luis Gil. Coming off a breakout season for the Yankees. We know you watch a lot of Yankees baseball here in New York. We know you were banging the drum for Gil.
I haven't actually sat down and watched the baseball game.
Well,
outside of the playoffs, honestly. Yeah. I maybe actually when I do the watch parties with people, especially for like opening day or stuff, but I watch it later. That's true. You watch based on pitchers and you watch on delay sometimes, but you were banging the drum for Gil.
at the end of spring training, when it looked like he was going to win a spot in the rotation, you were suggesting that there was a lot of upside here to make him a worthy late round dart throw in your drafts. I think it was kind of the best case scenario for him based on what the range of outcomes was going into 2024. I don't know that anybody expected him to have the season that he did. So why does it not seem like you're projecting this to continue next year?
Yeah, so I do want to recognize that Luis Heel, like a lot of volatile guys that are cherry bombs, has gone through ebbs and flows of what he's good at, what he's bad at. And watching Heel, we can obviously recognize that the four seamers everything for him. 13% swing strike rate this year. Threw it 50% of the time, and it's coming in at 96, 97, just like Kevin Williams. With solid extension, like it's always, everything is solid. It's like a 1.2 height adjusted VAA. I thought it would be a little bit better than that. I thought it'd be close to like 1.5 or so, but it's 1.2, which is again fine. It's not elite, but it's above average. IVB around 16. We did see it closer to 17 and 18 at the beginning of the year, then it fell off. And then extensions at 6.7, which is slightly above average. I consider that somewhat average. Like 6.4, like 6.3 to 6.7 is essentially average to me. But really, once you get to like 6.9 and 7, that's when you get excited. And we get down to like 6.1, 6.2. Then I'm like, that's not good. I know I'm not talking about height. 6'4" is the perfect one, guys. Everything taller than that, it's too tall. Sorry, Spore, but no, that's scary height. I'm right at the threshold of 6'4". But no, the other element is really just strikes. And if he can throw strikes with both his slider and his changeup. And what was interesting as the season went on for Luis Heel was that the changeup went to the wayside. And that was the really exciting thing for me in the spring. Was Luis Heel, I expected just four-seamer slider, the Jared Jones approach, the Spencer Strider approach. But then we saw this changeup actually take form and become a very dependable offering at the end of spring. It's why we were both really in on it between him and Jared Jones. We slightly favored Heel. I slightly did, but like 2 or 3 spots, but it was still big question marks, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, that changeup really made Heel's season for a good stretch. And then it disappeared a bit by the end. It wasn't nearly as consistent, fewer strikes on it, while the slider became more of that dependable thing in the zone for Luis Heel. I hate this. I hate the fact that it's different. It's changed. I can't tell you that Luis Heel is going to have both of these secondaries, one of these secondaries.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say that his four-seamer is a really well-commanded pitch. What I can tell you is that he's really good stuff, that when he does throw enough strikes across these, and not really bad ones, he's incredibly effective. He's more so than the average starter. He's more so than, I would say, the 75th percentile starter. He can be absolutely elite if you were able to say, I'm going to throw a changeup for a strike and I'm going to throw a slider where I want to, so on and so forth. I don't know if we're going to get that. And then, of course, there is something to be said about his efficiency. He had a 12% walk rate this year. And yes, it did mean a 6.2 hit per 9, because batters, it was one of those effectively wild things where you're not allowing hits. So you're just pitching around them. You're forcing them to chase a little bit more. And they don't really know if it's going to be in the zone or not. So that means they're not as comfortable and ready to go and swing at everything like a lot of the strike throwers are. So that means that, yes, you're going to have a lower BABIP, a 240 BABIP. Everyone says, oh no, that's so unlucky, so lucky. And the 78%, actually 79% left on base rate is so unsustainable. Well, if he continues with a 12% walk rate and the 27% K rate, you probably are going to see above average luck factors too in that way, because of just how hitters are approaching Luis Heel. So it's not necessarily going to be exactly this extreme. That said, it is going to be a suppressed hit per 9. It's not going to be at 8 hit per 9 plus with that terrible walk rate. Then you know it's a really bad season for Luis Heel. Long story short, we know the strikeout potential is there. And even if he does lower the walk rate a lot, obviously the hit per 9 does come up, but I feel like it's in a favorable way. That will improve the 119 whip. And I like him. I think he's going to get wins. It's just 151 innings in 29 starts. It's not like he did it in 25 or so and he was limited by injury and stuff to see 151 innings. He threw almost 30 starts, which is essentially the expectation for any guy. And 30 starts of a normal starter is 180 innings. That's 6 innings each. And for him to go 151, it's kind of showcasing that a bit. So all those things combined, it's why that Luis Heel, despite his 27% strikeout rate, the strikeouts he had, 171. So it's a little too volatile for me to put him up higher, but I felt like he needed to be above the boring Toby types underneath.
Yeah, remember there were bullpen concerns for Luis Gil as a prospect. Some people suggested that he might not be a starter. He was used in multiple innings at times, and there were a lot of Yankee fans that didn't think he was kind of locked into the rotation. And a part of that command is a reason. I mean, the difference between him and Jared Jones, a 12% walk rate for Luis Gil and a 7.5% walk rate for Jared Jones, a 61% strike rate overall for Luis Gil, and I believe it was a 68% strike rate for 67% strike rate for Jones. Jones throws more strikes. Jones had a higher swinging strike rate. Jones had a higher CSW. Luis Gil is a guy with only 3 pitches and iffy command. So when, as you mentioned, when the command of those pitches goes, he doesn't have as much to fall back on. From July 1st on, which is the final 13 games of the season for him, he had a 3.95 ERA and a 1.3 WHIP. That came with a 25% strikeout rate and 11% walk rate. Like, we're not just going to extrapolate that out and say that's who he is, but it is an indication of what happens when the command isn't fully there. A 4 ERA with a 1.3 WHIP and a 25% strikeout rate is not doing you a lot of favors in fantasy purposes. And obviously there will be better stretches as well because he has good raw stuff. But if he doesn't get that command in check, it's hard to see him reach the upside that we saw at times this year.
And the really thing I say a lot is, like, you don't want someone that is a headache, a hipster, that you don't know what to do with. And there is certainly potential for Luis Gil to be that, especially after the first month of the season.
Yeah. And the command improving or command getting better is really hard. It did happen a little bit with your number 50 starter. And that led to a little bit of improvement for him. And that is Hunter Green.
It is.
Hunter Green is another guy who I talked about in my first pitch Arizona presentation, because in the preseason before last year in spring training, we got this, Hunter Green is throwing a splitter. Hunter Green is throwing a curveball. He is going to be like a new pitcher. And then we saw the best season that we've had from Hunter Green. But as you and I both know, it had nothing to do with the splitter, which he threw 8% of the time. It graded out poorly in PLV. He threw it in the zone just 33% of the time. He threw it for a strike just barely over 50% of the time. It had a sub 23% CSW. It did not get chases in 2 strike counts. It had just a 14% put away rate, which is how often a 2-strike pitch results in a strikeout. So it wound up being a pitch that he kind of just like threw over the plate early in counts to fool people. It wasn't good. Though the 4-seam fastball, he improved his extension on it from 6.3 feet to 6.5. When you're throwing that hard and you're improving extension, it does get on people a little more. And he threw the fastball inside to righties 6% more, which helped him. But as you and I talked about just rudely during somebody else's presentation at First Pitch Arizona, and we apologize, but the fastball had a minus 15 hit luck. That means 15 balls put in play on the fastball that were not hits should have been hits based on batted ball quality, etc. This is a little bit of like some minor improvements and a little bit of luck, making it seem like Hunter Green took a huge step forward when he probably took a small step forward.
Right. Yeah. Hunter Green to me is a perfect example of, I mean, last year, for example, I had Hunter Green like 60 or so, just because I just don't want to touch it. I don't want to draft this. It's going to drive me up the wall. And I was convinced at first earlier in the year that Hunter Green was getting more vert on his 4-seamer, just a little bit better at getting a separation between his 4-seamer and his slider. But his slider actually abandoned him a little bit in this past season. And it bothered me look, if you're going to be two pitches rather, in Cincinnati with the worst extension, like he does, it's not the worst. I'm sorry. There are guys that certainly have worse extension than Hunter Green, but it's not something that's helping him. It's 6.5. I should say it's average. I apologize. But that's why that 97.6, sometimes you see like 100 or so, is not as much as overwhelming as say like Garrett Crochet's or something like that, which is 97, but with 7.5 extension. And it's just crazy. it just jumps on them better for the other guys, where it's a little bit more readable, I think, for longer with 100 greens. And it's just so very risky. You think he's gonna have a .72 homer per nine again in Cincinnati? I don't.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
That's
No.
just I can't buy into that. And I hate playing the like, well, he's gonna allow more home runs game, but when it's so ridiculous, 7% home over fly ball rate, which I don't like quoting, but really the thing that I'm gonna do right now, which is bonkers, is I'm gonna quote XFIP. And why am I gonna quote XFIP? Because he should be an above average homer fly ball rate, not below that he was. And XFIP essentially says, well, if he has an average homer per fly ball rate, and now it's 430 for his ERA if he did, right? And that makes more sense to me, being in Cincinnati and just generally his track record before for Hunter Green. So I think it's just gonna be volatile again. I think you're gonna get some wonderful stretches. I know also you had like the 6 games at the end of 2023 that was an argument for Hunter Green being top 30. I think my first pass, I even had Hunter Green around 30 entering the season. I was like, you know what, this is kind of wrong for many reasons, and I changed it. And okay, but I really think that even if you include that and you say, look, now he's done it for, I don't know, 180 innings straight of this, it's just not going to be sustainable unless there's something brand new that Hunter Green does next year. Not to mention, of course, the injury history at this point that we can't ignore. And it's 150 is his career high. I hate predicting volume and injuries, but I do need to acknowledge that he's not going to be a 180 plus like others.
Yep. And there was some, there were people at First Pitch Arizona talking about him as like he has the ceiling of an SP1, and I don't see it. I wouldn't draft him thinking that he has the ceiling of an SP1. I think that there are other players going later than him or around the same range who actually do possess that ceiling, and I'd be willing to take gambles on them. I have Hunter Green at 52 right now in my first pass. So maybe I update that as the offseason goes on and I get a little kinder to him. But I still think that it's going to be well lower than where he currently seems to be going in drafts. And so, yeah, I think I'll probably be out on him. I have him like ranked much closer to a guy like Tanner Houck than I do to, guys like Jared Jones or whoever.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, who do you have different or higher than Green? Because he has a 52. I have him at 50.
Well, I have him high. So right ahead of him, I have Hunter Brown and Gavin Williams, who you have higher, but you have
so we don't know. There's mystery guys
in rankings. And then I have some of the guys we're going to talk about later who are in another episode who are in my veterans with upside and question marks tier. Who are slightly older, or like I'll just say, like I have Brandon Woodruff higher, and I understand that's massive coming off injury, but we've seen healthy Brandon Woodruff, and I
didn't know where to put Brandon Woodruff.
Downright elite. Yeah, I don't know. Shoulder injuries are difficult. We will get to that in the next episode or the next episodes in general. So again, that's going to do it for this small episode of On the Corner. We are going to continue going through our Knicks Top 200 5x5. So make sure you tune in to the rest of those episodes. I am Eric Samulski, Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of On the Corner.
All right, sweet. So I actually have these. If you want to just jump back now to the other ones, cool. I just have to finish actually the last one. I made them myself. Believe it or not, as we're doing this, that's what I can do, guys. I am a capable man. I can multitask. I'm sure it didn't look great of me to be like, It
happens. Sometimes I'm like, I'm pulling up stats and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm also trying to digest these numbers.
Yeah, right. It's what we do as podcasters, but you guys get this live right now, which is pretty fun. Have you been inputting the time stamps?
I have. Yeah. I did.
You're the best, Eric.
Next episode start time. So I'll put that in when we get it
amazing. All right. I should be able to upload these now. I need to add. How do I add overlay? Rodon, Strider, Glasnow. Boom.
And you need Pepia.
No, Pepia's there. No, the one that needs to update.
Right. Pepia there. Yeah.
Delete this. delete this and delete this. Sweet. An error occurred. Wait a moment. Okay. Please let me do that. But for example, yay, it worked.
Okay, cool. Should we
Awesome.
fire it up?
Yeah, let's go.
Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined as always by the man himself, Nick Pollack, as we continue going through his top 200 starting pitchers for 2025.
What is happening? Yes, we're going to start off with a bang here because we started doing these and news came out before I actually posted my top 200, and it just messes everything up, Eric.
It did.
Because we did these lovely
We got
numbers
to start
here
from
and there,
scratch.
and you
Back
just
to
got to
number
add
one.
like 2 to a lot of them. And I'm so sorry, everyone. But we even talked about one of these guys. But essentially, we got news, and we'll first talk about Roki Sasaki, I think, because we already talked about it in the last podcast quickly. But now I put him up all the way to 15 because it's confirmed that he's going to be posting. I know Passon put out this thing about, well, there's a chance that he doesn't, and he's also putting a lot of money on the on leaving on the table because he's not 25. But it seems pretty confirmed that he is going to post. And I'm all the way at 15. Do you think that's too high, Eric?
Slightly. I mean, I have him right now at first blush. I have him 19th, right around Joe Ryan for me. So I think, I mean, obviously it's like, yes, it's a little high, but no, it's not crazy high. I have an article coming out on NBC Sports that's basically just about Roki Sasaki and his pitch mix and what we can expect from him. I took some great stuff cited, obviously, from Saris at The Athletic, from Lance Brosdowski's video that he put on YouTube. Listen, there is, when he was on, Sasaki had 100-mile-per-hour fastball. I mean, it averaged 99. So when we say 100-mile-per-hour fastball, we mean 100-mile-per-hour fastball that had like elite vertical movement and horizontal movement, and fairly average extension. And it took a step back last year. And it will probably take a step back from what we saw in Japan because the Japanese balls, the NPB baseballs are tackier, they're stickier, so you get a little bit more movement on that. But Lance Brosdowski's video he put on YouTube, I highly recommend anybody check it out. He spoke to some people and had a really good breakdown suggesting that a lot of the Sasaki dealt with arm fatigue. And it's important to remember it was upper body fatigue, arm fatigue. There was never a diagnosed strain. There was never a diagnosed tear. There was never anything like that. It was just like fatigue of the arm. And some people pointed out that while he was pitching through that, some of the lower body mechanics seemed to be different than what we had seen from him before. And so his mechanics shifted as he was dealing or compensating for his arm fatigue. And that really led to a loss of velocity. Also, the arm fatigue would have done that, but also a loss of movement or a diminished movement, not only on the fastball, but also on some of the secondaries. Apparently, Sasaki has come out and said that in addition to, how good the team is, he really is valuing pitcher development and player development in the team that he chooses, because he's going to get international bonus pool money. He can't sign for like $400 million. And now that doesn't mean he's not going to choose the Dodgers. The Dodgers have developed pitching pretty well. They haven't necessarily kept it healthy well, but they've developed pitching. And so if a smart team is identifying the lower body mechanical changes and saying, hey, I can fix these for you, then Sasaki's upside is a top 10 pitcher in all of baseball, just on pure raw stuff.
Oh yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Even if he's only thrown 130 innings in Japan, so even if he's capped at like 150, because again, he's going to be 23, you're thinking about him long term. You're not like, Shota Imanaga, he's already 31 years old. You don't really care if you use Imanaga more than he was used in Japan. With Sasaki, you are thinking 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, etc. So they might not burn him to the ground, but he's going to get enough innings where if his stuff is back, he's going to be a really solid pitcher.
I mean, look, anyone that says like, oh, the rotation's full, it's going to be a 6th man if they get Roki Sasaki. There's no reason not to, especially considering it's going to be a normal 6-year deal because it's going to be full team control the entire time. And yeah, they're going to work around this and expect him in the rotation wherever he does sign. I would say that one thing that really excited me actually was that Lance Brzezowski's video showcased that his extension went from like 6'1" to 7. And I texted him during the video, just being like, "Oh man, this stuff's really cool." Also, fun note, he put in his video called plus swinging strikes. And I said, "How dare you not make it CSW? What's how?" And he's like, "Well, I don't think that everyone understood it." I'm like, "Okay, that's fair, but you should. Everyone listening knows what CSW is, so just put it in there." Now, I mentioned that my favorite comp. He mentioned Hunter Green for a moment, but then the extension is much higher. And like I was saying with Gavin Williams on, the next podcast you'll hear, this is 97 with 7 feet of extension. Hello, hi. That's like Garrett Crochet a bit. That's pretty cool. That's actually, I don't really care as much about the IVB if it's coming in that hard with that extension. That's Garrett Crochet has like minus 15, like under 15 inches of vert. It doesn't matter. He doesn't need that. And when you think about vert and timing and extension and everything, like what vert does is, in effect, you have like a straight line to the glove, right? With vert, you're making it so that if batters think the timing is this, it actually needs to be a little bit earlier to get up as far as you need to. And with extension and velocity, if you're essentially saying, "Oh, cool, it's 97. Oh, wait, no, it's really like 88, 80, 99 or so, 98, 99. That's the same idea of, hey, I need to swing earlier than I am. It's the same concept of messing with timing and when you need to be there, especially at the top of the zone. So that's actually kind of cool to me. Look, like you have more extension now. You've worked on your lower body to get more out of this. And yes, the velocity went down to 97. Oh no, woe was me. Business is bad. If you've watched my Big Fat Greek Wedding, I still love this for Sasaki. And yeah, 140, 150 is kind of where I placed it. And it's why actually we have an update today for both Glasnow and Sasaki right next to each other, because they're kind of similar in this way. They both are massive strikeout guys without the full 180 innings, who I think per inning quality is going to be great. I mean, I think you're going to love this. Sasaki also isn't going to, I don't think, make the Ohtani signing of going to a team like the Angels. I don't think he's going to go to a non-competitive team that is just looking for that star or something like that. I think he's going to go to the Mets or the Yankees or the Red Sox, something along those lines.
Padres.
Padres could be, oh man, that'd be so fun if he went to the Padres. Oh, I would love that. Sasaki versus Ohtani and Yamamoto on the other side. That would be so cool. Man,
Sasaki and Darvish versus Ohtani.
That's true. And Darvish too. Oh my gosh. Now it'd be really sad if it's not him. If it's not going to the Padres. But right, so you're gonna love it. You're gonna just love this dude. He's so filthy. And I saw the other ones that I have at the bottom of my 20 of like Garrett Cole, and you have Max Fried and Aaron Nola's there and Pablo Lopez. And I thought Sasaki's a better pitcher. I already know this about him. He's going to be better on a per quality inning basis. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna put him here because injuries are weird. And I'm just gonna go for this.
Speaking of injuries are weird, Glasnow ended the season with an injury that he apparently is not having surgically repaired. So I'm curious your optimism. I initially had him ranked 44th. I have not yet. I have not yet come up from that. I'm not saying I won't, but I have not yet come up from that because I just don't. I don't yet have any more information about the injury and what's going to happen. And so why did you make that jump back up?
Sure. So initially, if you guys are listening to this after reading the top 200 on the day it came out, and first of all, props to you. And also, if you have PL Pro or PL Plus, you can read it ad free. We actually have gotten multiple people send me an email when they signed up saying like, "Oh, I'm so happy to read this ad free." One person called it my tome, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, it's just the best way to do it. And also just supporting me and this entire staff for the hard work we put into everything that we do. But with Glasnow, I had him right where you did, around 43, because I didn't know if the elbow injury was still a thing. I just assumed that he wouldn't be starting opening day, or at least not being involved at that moment. And now that he is, I think we just got to kind of treat him like he did the last year. He did exactly what we expected him to do, about 135 innings, which was great. And I am absolutely valuing quality 130 innings in my SP rankings much more so than I used to, because everyone gets hurt. And B, you have much better replacement level than I think you did in previous years.
Sure.
I think it's a lot easier to find something that is going to help you on the wire. And there are more and more intriguing guys that are learning, hey, I can improve my stuff overnight much faster than we have before. Right. A lot of people are like, cool, I throw 93 and this is just what I do. And hopefully this works. And that's that. I've done this forever. But you have a lot of players that are just so receptive to pitch development and approach that you see guys just kind of wake up when they make a change. And all of a sudden, whoa, this guy's not going on a run all of a sudden because of that. I think it's opening the landscape, which means you have to emphasize the elites more so without the fear of injury and risk. And let's be honest, guys, Glasnow, like 35% strikeout rate. Still, the slider is one of the best pitches in baseball. He throws really hard with absurd extension and has this crazy, like all three of his pitches are a 27% plus put away rate, which is nuts. Like that's elite for any pitch. Over 25% is elite in all three of Glasnow's when he throws them a 2-strike count does to get a strikeout. It's on the Dodgers too. You're not going to have Glasnow be sad when he pitches. He's going to be great.
Yeah. I think I could see myself moving him up. I need a little more time, to really kind of see how the offseason plays out. Two things he said. I could see it being optimistic, but it also gives me a slight pause where I guess he used to take a lot of time off in the offseason from throwing. And so he said the big thing that he's going to do this offseason differently is he's not going to stop throwing. He's going to keep doing plyos and he's going to throw twice a week starting in November as he ramps back up. Obviously, like throwing in November is going to look different
it's like long
throwing in February, but he's going to keep throwing and not just do nothing. That could be great.
Yeah.
But we don't know for sure. And the other thing is that he referred to himself as, quote, pretty much fully healed. And I'm like, what does that mean though? Like pretty much fully healed is a weird, it's like a little too vague for me in November to make a big change. If we see him start to if we get reports that he's, ramping up and throwing well, if he arrives at camp with pitchers and catchers and he looks like he's, feeling even remotely close to his normal self, I could see myself bumping him back up. And to be fair, me personally, the only drafts I do before pitchers and catchers start tend to be like draft and hold formats where I wouldn't really draft anybody like Glasnow because that injury risk in general is elevated.
Sure.
So I'm just going to be watching a couple things in the offseason.
Yeah, I get that. Also, be careful, guys, about NFC ADP. Seriously, be so careful because that is not 12-teamer redraft ADP. It's a completely different format where you're holding on to guys for the entire year. Dramatically changes. It really frustrates me, honestly, because it really does weigh on overall ADP, whether we like it or not. This is the first runs of ADP are going to be using that one, and it's going to affect how people draft. And I hate it because it shouldn't be that way.
Yes.
It's just how it is.
Speaking of injury concerns, your number 42nd ranked starter has dealt with some of them.
Before, I'm so sorry, Eric. We got a mini little tangent I want to make.
Okay.
I know we're not really doing these short guys. I have come around to really believe that pitching all year around is actually better than the start stop. And I'm not saying you do it every 5 days, full 90% intensity, everything like that. But I am of the opinion that when you're doing weight training in general, just think of it like that. You're not supposed to do hard reps, hard rep. You're supposed to be just kind of always moving. You're supposed to always keep, obviously give some time for rest and whatnot. But as long as you have like once a week throwing, you're still keeping it alive as opposed to stopping and then restarting. I am a fan of this. This is why I actually believe that every team should be a 6-man rotation to preserve elbows. It's why that should be instituted. And I actually like that Glasnow's throwing year round. I imagine it's not 90% intensity.
Yeah, I do too.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, about like preservation of bodies and like how you actually keep everything moving in the right way. I'm sure actually a lot of people smarter than me know data on this kind of thing. But,
you played in college. You had a you had like a weightlifting program, right?
Did I?
I mean, as a pitcher, who really knows? But in general, like, you know, if you are trying to maintain the health of a muscle, the strength of a muscle, oftentimes you might take a week off for a
Right.
reset if you needed to. You're building incrementally, as you said. You're at least doing something. There are some days that are harder. There are some days that are less effort. There are, you know, more reps, less weight, more weight, less reps, all that kind of stuff. But you're not like, hey, I'm gonna do, I'd say bench press, even though most baseball players don't do a lot of bench press unless you're Tyler O'Neill, because it gets in the way of a lot of things that you do. But you're like, hey, I'm going to do aggressive bench press for 6 months and really build up my strength. And then I'm going to take 3 months off from doing any bench press. And then I'm going to try to ramp up my bench press again. It's like, one, you're more likely to get hurt when you ramp back up just because you're ramping back up. And if you're in your head, you go, well, I'm usually at this weight. I'm usually at this velocity. Yeah. You try to get there quicker, and that leads to injuries. So I agree with you fully that, like, doing something, weighted baseballs, long toss, it doesn't have to be pitching off a mound. I don't think these guys are all throwing off a mound, but you're doing long toss, you're doing weighted balls, you're doing flat ground bullpens, you're doing flat ground, like towel throws, whatever it is that you're doing. Like,
towel
you're doing
things.
Great. I love the towel drill. You're doing things to increase your arm strength and your arm health. And if Glasnow hasn't been doing that at all, then this could be a good thing for him.
Yeah, it's so I just want to really reiterate that, like, if you guys hear, oh no, he's throwing the off, what's he talking about? Well, I think it's actually a bonus, as opposed to a negative of like, oh no, he's not going to be healthy now. I'm like, no, I think he's doing the right things that he needs to do.
Yes. So now we can get to your number 42 starter. We're going to try to go quickly through some of these other guys because we don't want these episodes to be particularly long. And this is an injury-filled episode. It starts at number 42, who was healthy this year, Carlos Rodon.
And we're going to talk about him after this break.
Okay, let's get through all these guys.
Here we go.
So Carlos Rodon, we know he's dealt with injuries in the past. It was a struggle at the start of the year for him. Wasn't really injury related as much as fastball velocity related. I talked about this in my first Pitch Arizona presentation based on conversations that you and I had during the year. But you're a believer that the changeup is an important development, or leaning on the changeup again. He had thrown it previously, is an important development for Carlos Rodon.
I really do. I mean, the pitch is a 26% swing strike rate this year. And yes, 58% strike rate, but it did improve as the season went on. Really seeing that mini bump in the road, the Matt Blake is like, all right, we got to change some things. And all of a sudden, it was like 25% four-seamers the next start. And they threw all secondaries all the time. Like, yes, that's what you're supposed to do, Carlos Rodon. I'm of the belief that Rodon is going to be more helpful than harmful. I also think that there is a large range, one of the largest in here, not in the binary way of like he gets hurt or not, more of just like quality per inning range. That of Rodon could just be filthy and ridiculous for a fair fun number of weeks, and all of a sudden just like, all right, now I'm not going to be able to locate four seamers when I want to, so home runs are up, and I can't really throw the changeup anymore. Slider is not very good, but I do want to think that when it comes to the entire contract of Carlos Rodon, it can really be summed up by like injuries the first year and really not coming through when he came back, and then finding his footing a lot in 2024. And understanding by the end, okay, this is what I need to be. It's not going to be a 2.5 ERA likely. It's likely not going to be like a 1.05 whip or something like that. But I do believe that Rodon is figuring out that he needs to have this changeup, which again, tons of whiffs on because his four-seamer has been that foundation. And now guys, you're going to have to adapt between the two and then also have the slider. Sometimes the curve will show up. That's fine. Maybe this cutter. I don't think so. I just believe it's a left-handed changeup focused league. And the fact that Rodon is starting to believe in this, and I think the Yankees are too, I think you're going to see more of that next year. It's a winning ball club. He's obviously allowed to go 6 innings constantly, and he is a strikeout guy. Still, regardless of what you want to say about him, 26% strikeout rate this past year. Clearly, the 22% was the outlier in 2023, as we saw 33 and 35 the 2 years before that for Rodon. So even if it's 25%, if we get that every 5 days, 6 innings or so with decent ratios, like that's it. That's something you will absolutely take with those wins for Carlos Rodon.
Yeah, I'll just say from July 1st on, he threw his changeup 20% of the time. It was a 3.34 ERA, 1.18 WHIP, 31% strikeout rate.
There
I
we
think
go.
that feels kind of right,
Yeah.
like something like a 3.345 ERA with a WHIP around 120 and a really good strikeout rate.
Yep.
That feels like what you like a good expectation for Carlos Rodon. And he was one of those guys that I had. We talked earlier on, or we will
About
talk
Hunter Green. You're going to hear in
about
the next
Hunter Green.
episode. We had to jump it a little bit. Don't worry about it,
Yeah.
guys. Just listen to all the podcasts.
Yeah. But yes, we both have Carlos Rodon over Hunter Green. There's some other guys coming in this episode. Another here, probably the biggest injury question mark of the offseason.
Yeah.
Is your number 43 ranked starter, Spencer Strider. We should just, if people aren't aware, the Braves have come out and said that both Strider and Ronald Acuna will not be ready at the start of the season. They even threw out the possibility that those guys aren't ready until June.
Right.
At First Pitch Arizona, you and I both suggested that we were operating under the idea that Strider would have a delayed start. I am ranking Strider under the idea that he doesn't come back before June. I just think the Braves are probably under the correct assumption that they will be in the playoff hunt, and having Strider fully healthy and ready to go in the second half of the season makes more sense than rushing him back in. Strider had an internal brace surgery. We don't have a long history of pitchers coming back from internal brace surgery. So yes, as Jason Collette pointed out at First Pitch Arizona, no starting pitcher coming back from that has ever thrown more than 60 innings the following season. But again, really small sample size. Don't have a lot of guys coming back from that. So we don't really know what to expect from Strider.
Right.
But I think it's safe to say, expect him to miss 2 months of the season and rank accordingly. And so that's what I did. And that's, I guess, what you did, ranking him at 43.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not going to call it an internal brace surgery. I'm not going to use that acronym for obvious reasons. But with Strider, yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing everyone with the expectation that he'd be around in April or so, because he got his Tommy John surgery. I know it's not Tommy John, it is internal brace, but it's the same. It's just supposed to be a little different version of it. That's supposed to be a little bit quicker. They say 12 months. I don't care until I see more consistency with this. I'm just going to say it's 14 months. So we had that understanding of June, and it seems like Atlanta's in that same way. I agree with your assessment that, yeah, they're not going to rush him back because he is a huge part of any sort of potential run for them. I will mention, we're talking about this whole thing with injuries. Oh, we can't predict injuries, all this kind of stuff. Let's say he was starting the season with Atlanta. We would still not put him above 150 expected innings. And if he comes back in June, and let's say you cut out 9 starts or so from the expected 30, then it'll be 21 starts. And let's say it's like 20 at about 6 or so is still 120 or so. Okay, so just say 120 innings is where you should expect if it's June 1st or something like that. It might be like 100, 110, but it's of elite quality, right? You are like, I don't see a world where we're just hating that we have Spencer Strider on our team. I really don't. And especially when you're in a head-to-head league, that's absurd. I mean, you'd actually rather to have Spencer Strider in the second half of the year than you would in the first in some cases, of course, for playoffs. But don't overlook, like, you have to win the rounds in April and May to be there in September. I've certainly made this mistake of investing too much in the future in the past, and I've learned my lesson. And that does make me more hesitant. But I get the argument that with all this injury talk, like, Spencer Strider should be more highly valued as someone coming back with a healthy elbow. This is something I talked to with a couple other guys that I really respect as well, including yourself. Like, I think we should be treating guys coming back from Tommy John with the Tommy John honeymoon a little bit higher than those who have injury concerns but have not gotten injured with their elbow yet.
Right.
Because that should be a healthier elbow than the other one, right?
Should be.
So Strider at 43, I thought it was a good point of like, okay, I always say value now is worth more than value later, about 2 times and not 2.5. But it is Strider, and Strider is just so good that I think I can figure it out. I'll essentially have an extra roster spot in the beginning, which is when it's more valuable for figuring out who those good guys are in the first week or so. So I draft Strider, put him in the IL. Now I have 2 spots instead of 1 necessarily, right? That normally leave like 1 open. So I'm okay with it. Like it's Strider plus. Always remember that, especially for him. 2 months of something else and then Strider. It's not just 100 innings or so from that roster spot. That's incorrect. So yeah, I'm going after it around here because you have like the other ones are like, no, Logan Webb. Okay, fine. You're going to get me all those wins and stuff. Roto, you might want to lower it just a touch, but still remember it's Strider plus something else is what you're getting with this pick.
Yeah. Obviously league format dependent, but yes, that is an interesting way, a good way to approach it. We have another pitcher, number 44 for you, coming off an arm injury this year, who didn't have surgery, but was able to make it back onto the mound. And it's Kodai Senga.
Kodai Senga. Yes, I had him actually around 23. And then there was, him talking about the setback before the playoffs. He was rushed. He's not fully there. Mm-hmm. And I get a sense that Senga is still dealing with stuff. So there's confusion. I essentially initially had Strider, Glasnow, and Senga all together because they all had this haze for the start of the year. Obviously, Strider's more streamlined and clear of like a performance aspect. But then with Senga, it's like, hey, are you going to be fine? I don't really know.
Also, and I still have them in a row because I haven't moved Glasnow up yet. So that makes sense to me.
There you go. Right. So with Senga, though, I am a big believer, especially considering that from June onward in 2023, he really figured out his cutter with his four-seamer and just how to make those two work and not just going four-seamer ghost fork together. Like this was a really nice three-pitch tandem. When I talk about extension guys, like the cutter inside the zone for strikes made the four-seamer, which is a shotgun blast, that much better. Even though it didn't have the massive swing strike rate results, it did get the weak contact results that you want to see. So don't really treat the playoff version of Senga as who he is. I think he's still hurt, and that is why I have him here. It's a bit more of a wild card, so I had to bring him down to 44. If he's starting the season healthy, if he's not, there's more confusion, and I'm willing to take the chance here at 44 for Senga.
Yeah, and remember that the injury after returning, the injury that caused him to be sidelined again was not an arm injury. It was, I believe, an Achilles injury. I know it was lower body.
Yeah,
I believe it was an Achilles injury. Injuries like that can also prevent pitchers from throwing, right? If you can't push off or land properly, you're not throwing. So even though it's not an arm injury, you are going to take time off. That is going to create a need to build back up again. So that could also have led to, when he says there was a setback and he felt rushed, it doesn't necessarily mean there was an arm-related setback. It could just mean that he didn't feel like his arm was where it needed to be pitching the way that he was pitching, but it was the playoffs and he wanted to get ready and whatever. But so, yeah, I have him in the same range that you do, same injury concerns here. And then the final pitcher in this five-some, which is actually, I believe, a six-some because of our update, has no injury concerns that we know of right now. It's number 45, Ryan Pepiot. Ryan Pepiot coming off his first year with the Rays. You wanted to see high fastballs. You got high fastballs.
You got them.
But did we get the type of season we wanted out of Ryan Pepiot?
Yeah, so we didn't see as many as we wanted. Also, Ryan Pepiot's four-seamer being up is like 51% high lock, which is pretty much league average. And it was 44% the previous year. So we did get more of it, which is good. But the reason I think that he didn't have more was, well, his command is kind of weird. It would be there some games and he would just dominate and things were great. I mean, this is a 14 to 15% swing strike rate four-seamer, about 7 feet of extension, like 6.8. And the vert I do want to mention is 18.5. However, in the Trop, which is not where he's going to be playing next year, they emphasize vertical break by about 1 to 1.5. So I'm going to say minus 0.75 off of this vert, because that technically, I'm just going to say like half of his home games were in the Trop.
Right.
Just to get an understanding of the 16.5 to 18.5, let's just put it like 17 to 18. I know that's not accurate. It's just a general estimate, which is fine. That's still really good vert, right? On that four-seamer at 95 with good extension and also a 1.2 height adjusted VAA. Like it's across the board, a phenomenal four-seamer, 93rd percentile in PLV, Ryan Pepiot's four-seamer. But what does he pair it with? Well, his changeup that he came up with as a 80 grade changeup was what the report was. It is filthy when he executes it. Doesn't always execute it, but 62% strike rate. I wish it was a little bit better. The O swing went down a fair amount this past year. He does throw it in 40% plus of 2 strike counts. But it's just sometimes just floats up too much in the zone and it really bothers me. And then the slider, that, man, when I saw this thing cooking, it is so glorious. And it's a 3-pitch mix really with those pitches of the 4-seamer, changeup, and slider for Ryan Pepiot. He's not totally efficient yet. He's not totally polished when it comes to command. 9% walk rate is just, you are so close to being so dope if you can just nail this constantly. But I don't know if you will. And then you throw in the fact that the Rays are going to Ray, and I don't think that they are going to completely let him loose. He just threw 130 innings. We've seen from like Shane McClanahan that he was able to, but I think that Pepiot is too inefficient to really make that leap yet. But it's possible. It's possible he becomes the backbone of this rotation with Shane McClanahan and Shane Baz. It's going to be amazing. And the strikeouts will be there. 26% strikeout rate last year for Ryan Pepiot could get better. I like him a lot. I just recognize that I can be stuck in this volatile state with him and not really willing to really go that next step. But honestly, most games I saw him, it was just like, oh, you're doing the right things. And just so close. Yeah. And like, oh, fine, that whatever. But no, you're so good. I really hope that he takes that step forward again.
And we talked about him enough during the year that I also saw those exact things, but I have him ranked 39th because I'm banking on that improvement. And I just have him. It's basically just moving him ahead of those injured guys and not after those injured guys.
Sure.
Is basically, and again, that comes down to how you're constructing your roster at the time.
Well,
are you willing to gamble on a strider?
You want to know the difference?
Or whatever?
This is the difference. The reason why I put the injured above him, because let's just put it in a binary state. Okay. Of like the upside happens or the downside happens, right? The upside happens for Pepiot. He is like those injured guys. If the downside happens, he's off your team like those injured guys, right? Sure. And I like the upside more of the injured guys than I do of Pepiot.
I get that. That's fair. That is a fair point. And again, that's, depends on your roster construction and how you're drafting and all of that.
That's literally just as like how I made that choice. You can argue, hey, Nick, more innings theoretically for Pepiot on that upside one. I get it. I believe in the quality inning of those injured ones. So there it is.
Yeah,
that's it.
There it is. There it is for all 5 of these starting pitchers on today's episode. That's going to do it. I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
I'm going to do some, just work on some towel drills for my pitching form, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I'll check you on the next episode of On the Court. All right.
We're cooking.
Maybe just do 4 instead of trying to get more out this time because it's already 4:15.
Getting 4
total episodes as opposed to trying to do like 5 or 6.
Oh yeah, I remember we were trying to. When's you're out?
Theoretically, like 4:45, 5 o'clock would be great.
So let's it'll probably make it 5 and have 2 more of these. That's probably my guess. But if you go really quickly, we'll go really quickly. I'll try as.
Remember when we said we were going to do these 15 minutes each? That was fun.
Oh, I know. Maybe we will. Let's see. Here we go. You ready?
Let me get a timer going. All right.
Thank you guys for watching live. Y'all are the best. Uncle Ted, thank you so much for joining. We can't really answer your questions on this, but it's amazing. You are putting in all your things and you're saying a lot of these pictures that I don't know why you are focusing on those, but maybe it's 12-teamer versus like deeper 15 plus, which I totally understand. All right, you ready?
Keep typing. We're reading. We just can't get through it in this one. Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined on this journey through the top 200 by the creator of the top 200 himself, Nick Pollack. Nick,
what is happening, y'all? If you don't know, by the way, we sign up every one of these episodes as the Pelican and the Lion. If you're wondering, it's because we went to rival high schools here in Brooklyn, a couple years apart. But he went to Packer. Eric did, the Pelicans. I went to Berkeley Carroll of the Lions. There you go. And thank you so much for listening to these. That's your bonus. That's what you get for listening to all these episodes.
Your bonus
now. You're in the pitcher list. No.
You are in the know. It was much discussed behind the scenes. We're through a quarter of your top 200.
Oh my gosh.
We've done the top 50. We're going to go through 51 to 55 today. As a reminder, you don't need to listen to these in order. Feel free to, but feel free to bounce around, figure out where, we've talked about a pitcher you're interested in. Go back, listen to it. If you forget things, these will be up here and hopefully be something you can utilize throughout the entire off season. If you did listen to these in order, or I guess in order, 2 episodes ago, we went over a lot of injury prone pitchers coming off injuries. This next guy is kind of like a weird continuation of that. He's coming off a mostly healthy season, but he has been mostly injured in his MLB career. Your number 51 starter is Reynaldo Lopez.
Yeah, 135.2 innings this past year, and really, if you want to say 134, he had 1 inning of relief after, where it was a 1.99 ERA as a starter, which is what? That's just, I feel like we need to be praising him more for this. I'm sure I'm just missing all of it, but that's crazy. 1.99 ERA and over 130 innings is absolutely nuts. Awesome to see it. Eric and I were really excited about him this season just because, hey, cool, here's a guy throwing a really good fastball and a slider. Didn't have enough strikes, but lots of whiffs as a reliever. Let's see if it sticks. And it did. Him and Crochet were the only 2 that really stuck from being a reliever to a starter, where everything kind of just repeated itself. Now, that 4-seamer is weird. And he had an 87% overall left on base rate, which is obviously not going to work. The slider failed to hit a 60% strike rate to either handedness. 54% against left-handers is really stark, and I'm very worried about that for next year for Reynaldo Lopez. It's just strange to see a sub 8% walk rate with that number 2 pitch being that low of a strike pitch. Really, the 4-seamer just came through for him so much. It shouldn't repeat. That said, it should be helpful. I think Atlanta is going to be a good team supporting him both defensively and offensively. I think that Reynaldo Lopez isn't going to necessarily take a massive step back, but yeah, it does feel as if he's not going to. I don't know if we're going to see any sort of how much this workload really affects him for next year, and I think it's going to be good. Just not this necessarily 27% strikeout rate, 111 whip, like closer like 24% strikeout rate with like a 118, 120 whip, because that's walk rate's going to go up and everything's going to kind of implode a little when that happens.
Yeah, I'm trying not to pay for an obvious career year for a pitcher who's dealt with massive injuries in the past, but I'm also not trying to suggest it didn't happen.
Right.
I have him 49th, likely ahead of pitchers I would probably draft over him. But again, it's the end of like an injury tier. And I didn't want to bump him down to the next tier, and I might have to. So we'll see. But yeah, that's it for Reynaldo Lopez. I think you kind of covered it. Another guy who I think is coming, definitely coming off I don't know if it's a breakout because he's been really good in the past, but like a rejuvenation, we'll call it, for your number 52nd ranked starter, Jack Flaherty. And I think people would be surprised, given how good he was this year, that you put him down here. I will say, Fangraphs player rater, and I know we know these things are not, they're not the be all end all, but just in terms of understanding the fantasy season that Flaherty had, he was the 12th ranked starting pitcher on the year. So what about from a fantasy perspective? Like, what do you think will not, won't duplicate, I guess?
Yeah. Pretty amazing, right, guys? Jack Flaherty is the perfect showcase of why you need to have an open roster spot on your team. Especially like right after the draft, you need to understand that there are these guys who are just going to appear and just dominate. Jack Flaherty is one of them. I think you picked him up on the wire in 1 league. I picked him up in 2, and amazing. I just held on to this for the entire year. That said, that slider I don't think is going to be as good. It jumped up in swinging strike rate this past year. Its strike rate went up. His location of it was pristine. Absolutely just gorgeous all of a sudden, right at the bottom of the zone. In so many starts, I actually even saw kind of as the season was going on by the end, I remember seeing the slider not quite be there, and he was getting through these outings with the Dodgers, but wasn't as explosive. And then we saw in the playoffs that Flaherty ran into trouble a decent amount because he had to rely too much on that fastball. And that fastball to me is not really that pristine of one. He does have a good flat attack angle, 1.3. Height adjusted VA is good. Vert, 14 to 15, not good. Extensions average, 6.6. and 93 mile per hour velocity. That is a pitch you're trying to avoid. You're trying to not let it get hit. 43% ICR this past year, 40% previously. And it really hinges on the slider to be keeping guys honest. There's also the curveball that certainly took a step last year and then continued it this year. Over 62% strike rate, near 20% swing strike rate in both seasons. And I hope that does continue for him. But it's just like the slider of precision at the bottom of the zone for both of them. And when Jack Flaherty is cruising, it's both that curveball and that slider going over 50% of the time, while the four-seamer is just trying to sneak in and not get hit. And I think it's a tightrope. I think it's one of those things where he got into rhythm and then it didn't show up anymore. If you remember, even back in the day when we first saw Jack Flaherty, everyone was out. And then he had this unreal second half where the sinker was introduced and it just all went so well with him on the Cardinals. And then that became the guy, right? And then he got hurt. And then there's always like moments for Jack Flaherty. I think we're going to see another one this upcoming year. And I can't tell you if he's going to start the year with it or not. I can tell you that it's very likely for us to be in a headache mode with Flaherty of just, I'm not getting what I expected. What's going on? He's not that guy. I like him because that's why he's here. And, the 50s is not saying that I don't want to draft him. I'm still putting him above many, many pitchers. But the thing is, you have 50 more that I think are just so either clearer or have a better path to their ceiling than Jack Flaherty, where he really did show those signs of regression.
Yeah, I mean, listen, post trade deadline, Flaherty is worse in all the fantasy stats than Carlos Rodon, who we talked about on another episode. But I think you're getting and you have him ranked similarly to Carlos Rodon, but in early drafts. And again, we've talked about not relying too much on ADP, but it's just a little bit of a look into the minds of people that Flaherty's going much higher. And I think there's some buy-in to what he's doing. I would not mind having Flaherty on my teams. I don't think he's a bad pitcher. I struggle with pitchers who don't have good fastballs, who also give up a decent amount of hard contact. Near 40% ICR allowed this year. It's a tightrope for me that it's not a profile I tend to love. So again, if he's available late in drafts and he falls, I'll happily take him. But it's not a profile that's going to shoot up my rankings.
Yep.
It's like it feels, yeah. I was going to try to segue it to his I guess, former teammate, who's your 53rd ranked starter. And really just everything that could have possibly gone wrong for Bobby Miller went wrong for Bobby Miller.
Yeah, it was bad.
How much of this is like what we saw in 2023 is real and we can't discount it, but what we saw in 2024 means that we also can't guarantee that what we saw in 2023 is ever going to come back again. This is one of my toughest pitchers to rank because of all that.
Of course. I mean, it's so tough. I think, honestly, it's as simple as he wasn't healthy when he returned. The knee was bothering him is what he said. I just think he just wasn't healthy. Eno mentioned that on the podcast of The Craft. And I was like, oh, yeah, duh. That makes all the sense in the world. I mean, he got hurt and then was down in AAA rehabbing for very long. And then they kept him there essentially, I believe, or they brought him back and was like, nah, we're going to put you back down there. I just think he's still hurt. And now you have an off season, you get to hit the reset button. His stuff is just far too good. And when I saw him come back up, the whole approach was just bad. It's not like the stuff isn't there. It's that he can't locate any of this stuff. And it means that he's getting into these counts he doesn't want to get into. He has to throw certain things. He's telegraphing essentially what he has command of, what he doesn't. It's crazy. He still throws 97, 98, even with that bum knee, with 7 feet of extension, with 15 inches of vert, 1.1 height adjusted VA. I mean, that should just be an absurdly amazing fastball. He has a changeup that only had a 46% strike rate this year instead of the 56. Right. And this was something he threw like 15 to 20% of the time in 2023 and in 2024. Like that has to get better. You had a sinker that went from a 31 to 32% ICR all the way to 52 because he just located the thing over the plate instead of actually locating where he used to, which was inside to right-handers. making this really amazing showcase of spreading out his fastballs. And then you have a slider that he just couldn't throw for a strike. I mean, we're talking a 48% strike rate for Bobby Miller's slider versus the 61% we saw the previous year. And even that I thought could take a step forward because he was pulling it a little too far out of the zone, especially in 2 strike counts. I only have an 18% put away rate. There's just like all these little things like, oh, cool. All you need to do is this little thing and that little thing. And he was there. And then, he just did not have any sort of control. I think it was just hurt and fighting the entire year. But hey, new season, new health. I'm super in. And I put him, I wrestled, of course, like you did for Bobby Miller. But like, this is the point where everything else after is not as enticing as far as upside goes. And the gap between the things in tier 7 and below in the 50s and further, just to me is not the absurd impact that you will be like, oh man, I can't believe I just didn't get, Nathan Eovaldi this year. I lost my league because I didn't go after him. Hey, I hope he has the best season ever, but like in all likelihood, it's going to be positive, but not, oh, I can't believe I did that. Right. Bobby Miller is that guy that could be that. And look, if he's just completely out of the whack of command, then fine, you move on. But this is like a top 15 pitcher entering this year from previous years, and I would love to get.
I think I had him like 17th. I'm not willing to believe that everything we saw in 2023, but also as everything he did as a minor leaguer, just was a figment of our imagination. It's far more likely and far easier to believe that this is a pitcher who got hurt early in the season, who was pitching hurt, and it led to drastic changes throughout basically everything that he was doing.
Right.
And so sure, maybe he's not a top 15 starting pitcher. Maybe there's volatility, but I don't think he's nearly as bad as we saw last year. And so at this price, it's really all upside at this price, because as you said, if you're drafting somebody outside of the top of your top 50 starting pitchers, you're basically drafting in a burn and churn spot. And if the guy sticks, great. And if he doesn't, you'll find somebody on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, here's the fact of the matter. Bobby Miller throws in spring training, says he's feeling healthy, best shape of my life, whatever. You see like 3 starts of him and he has, I don't know, 15 strikeouts and 1 walk or something like that. I guarantee you Bobby Miller's going to go in the top 30. Like that's what's going to happen. And I hope it does. I hope he's cruising like that. If there is still concern by the end of March, I still might draft him just to be like, all right, maybe he's like saving it and being safe with his health and stuff. But I would not be surprised if his ADP in March is like, in top 30 starting pitcher because of he just looks ready to go.
Yeah. A pitcher who looked ready to go and saw a huge bump in his value recently is your number 54 starter. And we'll talk about him after this break. Wait. We didn't do an ad break, did we? Oh, it's the old one. I was like, what is happening?
What is happening?
I confused myself because I didn't take out the timestamp from that.
Yeah.
Your number 54 starter is Bobby Miller's Dodgers teammate, Walker Buehler, who looked like a different pitcher in the World Series. And so we're left with this question of, am I ranking him based on the Walker Buehler that I saw prior to his injury and coming back from his injury? Or am I ranking him based on this gassed up World Series version of Walker Buehler that looked like the Walker Buehler of like 3+ years ago? And I'm curious where you fall down on that. I think 54 for you, I think is higher than you had initially had him.
Yeah, I went back and forth on it. There was a quote he said, like, look, I needed the adrenaline of the playoffs. That's how I work. And wasn't really myself until then. I want to make it very clear. There's a lot of things that people are assigning to Walker Buehler about, okay, this showcases like second Tommy John. This showcases problems with maybe Dodgers, or I don't know, just a lot of different associations I've seen. And I want to remind everyone that Walker Buehler, before his injury, was a Tommy John guy. A sticky stuff guy. Mm-hmm. He was someone who we expected to see back in 2023 and we didn't. And then in 2022, got Tommy John. And I think that the 4-seamer is dramatically worse now because he doesn't have sticky stuff. This was like an absurd 18 to 20 IVB 4-seamer. And it was the foundation because everything else was not like the greatest secondary. They were strikes, they helped, but it was the four-seamer that did everything. And the four-seamer isn't as good as it used to be. And without that, Walker Buehler is not that top 5, top 10 workhorse kind of arm. He's more of like an upside, like the best version of like Max Fried is what you're hoping for from Walker Buehler. And I'm not saying he can't do that, but I do want to attribute a lot of his failures in that you don't have sticky stuff now, buddy, and you have to be a different pitcher. Obviously, of course, there's something about getting back in the groove of it, and I think his approach was really strange, and there's still something I don't understand, obviously, about how the Dodgers go about teaching approach to their pitchers, because I think some of them should have very clear cut, like, put it here, do this, go there. And a lot of times Buehler felt like he was just kind of throwing anything he can inside the strike zone, and that was that. And without any sort of idea of like, cool, I'm going to throw this over here, then this over there, that kind of thing. But yeah, we've saw in the playoffs was, yep, that's pretty good. And he clearly still has it in him to go 6 innings, in my view. Give him another offseason to really hone it in more. I'm a fan of it, but I also don't think he is going to be a pitcher flirting with a 27% plus strikeout rate. I don't think he's going to be a 1 to 105 whip guy. I think he's going to be a Holly, which is what this tier is, of like a 23% strikeout rate with good ratios and wins that you're really happy with, but does not take that extra leap to really become an ace.
Yeah, I had him in the 70s. I bumped him up to 49, and that feels about as high as I can go right now, unless I see something drastically different in the spring. Just because, like, when I ranked him in the 70s before, it was based on, the season of work. And so the 2 starts in the World Series were great, and I'm not going to ignore them. But we've seen a lot of people get a playoff bump that doesn't carry over. Usually it's hitters, but also like Jordan Montgomery. And so like, I just don't want to drastically change my view on him from 2 starts. I'm going to acknowledge it and not overreact.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was not a playoff tax for number 55 because his team got eliminated just super, super early. And so number 55, who... Hold
on a second. Hold on.
Over.
No, we don't have one. He didn't put one in. All right, I gotta make it 2 seconds.
Okay.
2 seconds. I'm so sorry, everyone watching live right now.
Put a note in here.
Oh my gosh. No, it goes like this. Okay. Hyphen Zach Eflin. All right. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. No one's gonna see this except Josh later. So Josh, unbelievable. What are you doing to me? And I put it at 54 too. It's not 54, it's 55. Oh gosh. Josh, unbelievable. Look what you're making me do. Embarrassing myself in front of everybody. Oh man, yes, I want to replace it. Okay, now I need to make it transparent. So hold on, I got to go to this thing and got to go to that thing. Transparent tool. Oh my gosh, transparent background. Oh man, upload another one. I got another one. This is exhausting. This is exhausting, Eric. And I can't believe that this wasn't here already for me. Josh. And I had to do it. I had to do it, which is just wrong. It's just wrong. Okay.
Shameful, really.
It's unbelievable that Josh would put me through this. And you and the listener right now have to be put through this because we didn't have a Zach Eflin overlay made. And I just think that's wrong. I just think that's absolutely wrong. And what do you know? Look at that. Look at that glorious thing.
I'm gonna make
we got there. Take it away.
And your number 55 starter did not get a playoff tax because the team got eliminated too fast. It was number 55, Zach Eflin. Zach Eflin, huge breakout in 2023. You had some reservations in the preseason. I had him ranked, I think, 22nd overall, 21st overall, or among starting pitchers. I still bought into the changes that the Rays had made. The Rays didn't even buy into the changes because they traded him to the Orioles. And now Eflin is down to 55 for you.
Yeah, so Eflin is good, and that's that. I think what we saw in 2023 was him squeezing out the most he could with his arsenal. And I remember our rankings last year. I think I was pretty much middle of the pack. I'm pretty much saying, look, I don't think he's going to be as good as he was last year. I think I need to pull him down from top 15 for that reason or so. I had him like, I don't know, 23 or something like that. And with Eflin, I had to keep him up because there always is a chance that they can keep it at that level. But now that I've seen Eflin again, I'm like, yeah, it's not likely at all for him to keep it up at that level. 3.59 ERA and a 115 whip, but a 20% K rate, not the 26.5% K rate. Mm-hmm. When he was traded to the Orioles, Eflin did take a step forward in embracing the cutter once again. We saw that by the end of it. At first, not so much, but eventually we got there. But really think of Zach Eflin as a guy with a cutter and a curveball and a four-seamer that he saves to throw upstairs late in counts. It's not a good shape four-seamer, but it's just a surprise pitch, and it can get away with that at times. And then a sinker that he hopes to land backdoor against righties, sometimes jam them. And really, that's a problem a bit for lefties, and hopefully the cutter really does become that thing again that can nullify him there. And then he also has a sweeper he throws sometimes as well, but this is Zach Eflin, who's boring, but he's a good volume guy with more wins than we should have expected entering last year. 10-9 versus 16-8. That was also a big deal in that player rater. That's why I hate the player rater, because 178 innings in 2023 with 16 wins is like, oh, that's why he's going to be so high in that player rater.
Right.
But then the Rays weren't as good, so 10 wins. That's a huge difference. Obviously, of course, the stuff getting or the overall arsenal too. So you get Eflin, you're happy with it. You stick him in the entire year, you get production. It's not the grab for top tier ceiling starters that you might need in your draft, but you will not be hurt because you have Eflin on your squad.
Yep, fully agree. I bumped him down. He's 61 for me right now. I was over aggressive last year. Happy to have him more in deeper formats than 12 teams, but 12 teams, sure, if I took some volatile and upside guys earlier on. But yeah, not the breakout that we thought. But there are some breakouts coming in the next episode of On the Corner. So please make sure you continue to listen as we go 5 by 5 through Nick's top 200. I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll check you on the next episode. All right. I can do one more. We can keep
Let's go. But you gotta be out of 5, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna go. Go.
Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of PitcherList.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined as always by Nick Pollack as we continue to go through his top 200 starting pitchers 5 by 5.
Let's do it. Let's go. Who's next?
His hood's on. He's ready to go. We're going with one of your most talked about pitchers this year, partially because of a bet with Eno Saris, but it's number 56. Seth Lugo.
Once again. I feel like I got to talk about him all the time. I was forced to do it in Arizona on the panels, all this stuff with our podcast too. Look, Seth Lugo is exactly like Zach Eflin from last year, from 2 years ago, right? Like he squeezed the most out of his stuff. His curveball was absurdly good, and everything that he does is just trying to figure out how do I get to my curveball again. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that was great, where he has, of course, like 8 pitches, but it's really 2 sets of 4. Where it's different arm angles. Also for lefties and righties, it's also sets of 4. But really, the curveball is the best pitch. Everything else is and hopefully he can keep it going the same way. I think you had about like 7 weeks of dominance to start the year for Seth Lugo. And then after that, it was kind of mimicking the previous year with a few more strikeouts and like a slightly better whip. That is pretty much it from like May 22nd onward. For Seth Lugo, like 3.60 ERA and like a 112 whip and a 21% K rate. That's who he was since then. And we see this all the time from guys like Lugo, where you get more out of them for bursts, but then they usually just fall back down. Usually it's actually even worse than that when all is said and done. It's not just actually that 3.6 ERA outside of that. So yeah, Seth Lugo's fine. You're going to be happy with him. He's not going to be the same guy. Don't overpay for him, but it does feel like everybody else is on the same page. So yeah, 56 Seth Lugo, you maybe actually be able to get him there.
Yep. 57 is one of the most interesting starting pitchers to rank. He did not make my top 150, and it was just an oversight. I had forgotten about him, which is weird because I'm a Red Sox fan.
Yep.
But 57 is Lucas Giolito. I think you just have to kind of revisit what we were saying going into 2024 because a lot of that still holds in terms of, Giolito was not as great as he had been before, but he really wasn't terrible until he got traded across the country. He was going through some off-field personal stuff that he had mentioned at the end of the year. And the numbers pre and post trade are starkly different. He basically just the season cratered. He was excited to join the Red Sox. He liked the plan they had put together for him in terms of like getting him back on track. He got hurt. He looked good in spring, had a huge velo bump, which may have been part of the reason that he got hurt. And he underwent surgery. They are expecting him to be ready for the start of the season. However, as I blurbed for Roto World and as I pointed out in Arizona, if Giolito throws under 140 innings, the Red Sox get the option of having a team option for him for 2026 for just $14 million. $14 million for a pitcher of Giolito's caliber in today's Major League Baseball is a really good deal. I would say barring the Red Sox acquiring so many starting pitchers that they feel like they don't need Giolito, I would be surprised if he hit 140 innings because I think the Red Sox would want to give that option. So just expect there to be an innings limit, but I think he's still a solid pitcher, and I bought into the bounce back coming into this year, so I'll buy into it a little bit next year as well.
It's an internal brace again for Giolito. So he got his at the end of March. So it's I want to say like 3 weeks or so earlier than Strider. And I would imagine they're going to space this out so that when he comes back, he's just going and it will be under 140 innings because of that. So I would think like May 15th, something along those lines, June 1st. That's my expectation for Giolito. I think he's going to help. I think he's going to be really good. We've seen high strikeout rates, 25% plus from him. He used to be a workhorse. This is also the perfect example of like everyone's a workhorse until they're not. And I also really like his fit with the Red Sox being a secondary focused changeup guy, as opposed to the four-seamer at 60% of the time. He throws it already 42% in 2023, and it was at 48% the previous year. You could see it to 35% or so, and you might even see him get a cutter because he has a slider that isn't quite absurdly good. It's like a 15%, 16% swing strike rate the last 2 years. That was 22 and 23 for Giolito. I like it because I think you're going to get wins here. I think you're going to get just a solid pitcher when he does return. And I kind of want to favor slightly the fact that you don't get this for a month so you can get the roster spot for April. I think it's really nice, honestly, a little bit. I know I'm kind of wild in that take, but for someone that I don't need it all right away, it is kind of nice to be able to balance that because I know I will want it later. And you'll have a better idea of what your rotation is like then, and it's still going to be just 140 innings, so might as well miss that time in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, but I think Giolito might be an afterthought for some people in draft, so it's certainly a name to consider because I think there's some interesting upside there. If he starts the year on the IL, obviously harder in formats with no IL spot, but if you do have an IL spot and could draft him and stash him, could be interesting. A former Red Sox who some people are linking to the Red Sox in free agency, but I don't really think it's going to happen because he might go back to the Rangers, but it's number 58 for you. Nathan Eovaldi. We mentioned Nathan Eovaldi on another podcast. It wasn't disparaging. It was just saying Nathan Eovaldi won't make or break your season. But Eovaldi has been a rock solid starter for a while now. When he's on the mound, he pitches well. He battles some injuries and likely will be on the IL for times during a season. But what you're getting is pretty strong production out of somebody who I think you can get pretty late in drafts.
3.55 ERA and a 106 WHIP through his first 25 starts, and I think he got a little gassed in September. That was through September 4th, where he allowed a 7-run game and just wasn't clicking as well. 24% strikeout rate with a sub 40% ICR. I mean, he's good. I like the fact that despite not having 96 mile per hour fastballs, it was a 95 and change. Eovaldi still made it work. The splitter is one of the more consistent ones we've seen. 22% swing strike rate at a 68% strike rate last year. And we also saw in the playoffs that he, in 2023, they leaned more in splitters when he needs to. I like the fact that it's still a solid pitch for him. The cutter got hit a little bit more so this past year than we've seen previously, as I think it just really got too much of the zone at times. And that happened, and you'll never really want to see much of the curveball. It's just kind of there to, hey, here's a strike. So it really just comes down to how good is the four-seamer in a given year. And yeah, it was good. 35, 36% ICR. He's a solid pitcher. I just still worry that he's going to have those times of going down to 94 on it, as opposed to staying up at 96, 97. You wonder, was the year for it? And I totally get that Eovaldi said no to his $20 million option. Why? Because he needs to get in now, because next year he likely is going to decline too much. So if he's going to make some larger contract for like 3 years, he has to get it now.
He definitely,
because it will be worse.
He wants multiple years. He doesn't strike me as somebody who is going to age well. Not that he'll age poorly. Not that he's going to fall off a cliff. Hypothetical, or I was going to say hypothetically speaking, but I meant not figuratively speaking.
Yeah.
But I think that his profile isn't somebody who is going to necessarily like age gracefully.
Sure.
And so I'm a little weary, but I think where you have him is totally fine. I'm looking at I have him 64th. So I'm a little lower, but we're in the same.
No. It's guys, now that we're past the 50s, and really once you get to the 60s, it's like someone's going to have him at 65, someone's going to have him at 85. And it's like, yep, that's fine. Like really, the rankings don't matter as much. I think for both of us, there's an acknowledgement of when the cliff hits, of when I don't really care about this other guy. I would rather just chase for anything that can be consistent in early decisions. And if you remember for us last year, that was like our AJ Puck and DL Hall moment, where we're like, look, we're going to throw all this stuff out the window. We'd rather chase other things instead. And for this year, there's a little bit more depth. So I think you say 62. I mean, for me, it ends around like, I want to say like 65 or so. I mean, this is the Holly tier, and the Holly tier ends at 60 at the end of this episode. But really, tier 8 is like where I'm saying, no, look, I want to go for this. This is really the exciting stuff that I feel most confident about taking those upside flyers on. And then after that, which is tier 9, oh boy, that's like mid 70s. It just gets wild of just like, I don't know. So yeah. And you're going to see a lot of guys that like, how is Christopher Sanchez that low? You're going to say, I'm like, well, because I'd rather just go with someone like Nathan Eovaldi, where I believe in the day-to-day, or I'd rather just go for an upside flyer because, believe it or not, Christopher Sanchez isn't so far away from a typical wire play. But I digress. We got to take an ad break, don't we?
We do have to take an ad break. And we're going to do that right now. 136. We needed to regroup from that ad break because we got a really interesting pitcher to talk about next. Somebody who came out of nowhere. And curious to see where you think he goes from here. It's your number 59th starter, Ronel Blanco.
What's interesting about Blanco to me is I remember in 2023, Blanco pitched briefly, and I really liked his slider. And keep in mind, he did have 17 total games. 10 of those were in relief, 7 as a starter. And when he did start, that's, of course, when I cared. And I actually got to look at him having Blanco check, along those lines. And I like the slider most of all. Now, what was so exciting this year is that this changeup just kind of came out of nowhere to be a much more reliable pitch for him. And it wasn't on the effectiveness side. I mean, we saw 25% swing strike rate, 72% strike rate in 2023, but under 10% usage. While this year is 22% usage. And in the beginning of the year, I think it was close to like 30, 35. He lost the feel for it as the season went on. Meanwhile, the four-seamer is a pitch that gets hit hard, 44% ICR. It's not a good attack angle, but it is 17 to 18 inches of vert. It is 7 feet of extension. It's just at 93. So what I love about Blanco is that he really does go upstairs with that four-seamer, 57% high location. He pairs that with a slider, 20% swing strike rate with a 70% strike rate on it. But that got hit hard too, 40% ICR, because he really did just kind of throw it over the plate a lot. And I think I'm a little hesitant to lean too heavily into Blanco because I don't see him as someone who can just kind of whip out the perfect pitch of all 3 of them at any time. I think he's someone that just kind of goes dancing with the disco at times, which is sliders just over the plate and just whatever, get me a strike, with a four-seamer that he's hoping they chase out of the zone upstairs. 23% O swing, though, is not as high as you want. But that's because also it's only a 12th percentile 2 strike count. He's throwing these high four-seamers out of the zone earlier in counts than you guys would expect. And that's why you have a appreciated strike rate on it, despite all this usage and everything I'm talking about, right? It's a little interesting. So I don't think Blanco has that, hey, I can hit the top of the zone, inside the zone, effectively top third. He's
Right.
more of a just, I'm going to miss up out of it, which then forces him to throw sliders over the plate, which was why it was a high 40% ICR. The changeup is really the nullifier. And when that left him, he wasn't nearly as productive. But I really think he's a strong pitcher. They limited him to 167 innings. I say limited him because they said that, okay, we need to slow him down a little bit. But you might be worried about the percentage jump. And I totally get that. He's also someone who is going to be 32 in the middle of the year next year. I think the Astros are just going to throw him as much as possible. But yeah, it was a career year. 2.8 ERA, 110 whip. It should get worse.
Mhm.
I don't know how much worse. I don't know if it's going to be at that point of, oh no, this is just not good anymore. But generally, going to get you wins, going to be able to go 6 innings, if not longer. And I think the pitches themselves are good enough, but the changeup is missing early on. I think you are going to have a bad time with Blanco.
Yeah. Sorry, there was a literal power surge in my apartment for a second, and all the lights just blinked on and off, and I thought I was going to lose you, but I'm still here. We're here.
Never going to lose me.
We're talking about Ronel Blanco. That's so nice. Thank you. Yeah, listen, I'm low on him too. I just think it might be a flaw of mine, and I'll admit to it, but it's like a 31-year-old breakout of a pitcher who came out of nowhere, who I think has fine stuff but not great stuff on a team that was decimated by injuries and was replacing a lot of guys in their rotation and could get most of those guys back next year. I just, yeah, I'm going to have him lower than a lot of people, and maybe I'll take some shares in deeper drafts, but I'm not like super excited to get into it.
Exactly.
I'd rather have,
if he's doing well in the spring, I might be pushing him up closer to the the Rodon ranking for Ronel Blanco. But as of right now, it seems less dependable, as you're talking about, like it's peak season regression coming.
Sure. I would rather have your number 60 starter, and possibly that's just, not being able to let go of a thing that I used to like for so long. But at number 60, Yu Darvish, I think there's still ability in there, and I'm not ready to write him off fully. And so, I'd take him over a Blanco, maybe even a Lugo, to be honest with you. But yeah, why are you semi down on Yu Darvish?
I think we need to at least acknowledge that like Yu Darvish is going to be 39 in the middle of last year.
Also true.
And he just disappeared for like 2 months.
He did do that.
We don't know what it is.
Yes.
We don't know what it is. And it wasn't health. Like something was going on personally. I hope he's okay. I hope I hope him, the human, didn't do anything nefarious, or like it was held back or something was going on. I don't know. I'm not going to suggest that Yu Darvish is not the saint that he is. The fact that we are unaware in any aspect is just kind of like, I can't just ignore that, I guess.
Sure.
And it's part of the reason why he only had 81 innings this year. We've seen a decline, 136 the previous season. I like the skills of Darvish. I love what he was doing with embracing his secondaries well, not just kind of saying whatever it is today, it's fine. No, actually understanding cool cutters and sliders effectively, and four seamers like this and sinkers over here and so on and so forth. I think that as a pitcher in a per quality inning, I think he's going to be fine. He does go through stretches where just things don't work and it's frustrating. I think anyone who has rostered Yu Darvish before understands the back and forth pendulum swings of feel that he relies on. And I think that's going to be harder and harder to hold on to with age. Darvish, I think, is different than your typical 38-year-old. I just believe so much in his process and just how he's just being able to shape himself for the season every year. It's kind of amazing hearing all the things that he does. But at the end of the day, he might turn into one of those headache-inducing pitchers stifling the entire roster. And I think it's going to be clearer, at least for other guys, that you'll want to hold on to this or not. So Darvish, I like him. He's at the bottom. He's the very last one before the other ones where it's like, okay, now we're really going to start chasing.
Yeah. Yes, I fully get that. The age is something that, again, we talked about Nathan Eovaldi aging gracefully. I think Darvish will age more gracefully because he has aged more gracefully because he has an array of pitches that he can command. He's not so reliant on velocity. But yeah, I mean, it comes for us all. age, that is. And, he's had some injuries like the neck injury and things like that impacted him in a way that it might not have impacted him 10 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And that's certainly something to consider. Good team context. I imagine it will continue to be a good team context next year. And so, boring veteran pitcher who might have some value if he gets lost or forgotten about.
And I really do want to correct what I was saying. I don't actually believe in anything nefarious. It was
he said it was a personal issue with his family, but that's all the detail.
So I hope that everything is okay. Really, I don't want to suggest that he's in trouble with the law or anything like that. I do not believe that for you, Darvish, whatsoever. It is just one of those things of disappearing for that amount of time. Not just, okay, is everything fine? Are you going to do that again? And also just the disruption of that at this age and not being in that flow. It's just, it adds a little bit of a haze, I think, to what we can expect from Darvish next year. But no, I really want to rectify what I was saying before of just like, I do not believe that Darvish did something wrong and they had to hide it or something like that. Absolutely not. I think personally that he went through something horrible, and I hope he's doing all right now.
Yes, we hope he's doing all right. We hope you're doing all right. We are doing all right as we continue going through the top 200. I am Eric Samulski, Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And we'll see you for more of Nick's top 200 pitchers on the next episode of On the Corner.
Thanks for joining the live stream, everybody. We're going to be gone now. I think we're streaming later this week or next week.
Well, we're definitely doing Thursday, and we might do
Thursday.
We might do sometime this week at night. We'll try to sort that.
Yeah, we might do that at like 9 p.m. or something like that, because I have a podcast from 6 to 8.
Yeah.
So OTC podcast is going to be at 9 p.m. on Thursday. So come by, check it out, guys. All right. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you later. Bye-bye. Get out of here.